Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome to those online as well. My name is Carl Dobman, and I'm the Dean of the College of Architecture and Design at LTU. Welcome to the second lecture in our mini lecture series. Today's lecture on the future of libraries is sponsored by Interior Environments, so thank you to them. The topic of the library is the result of a confluence of a few different discussions and initiatives that are happening on campus. This semester, Lendelar's Interior Design Studio is also doing a design project around the library with input and insights provided by the library staff. I just learned about this recently, that we also have Comp Design working on a library program this semester as well. So there's a number of students thinking about the future of the university library. The library is a building type that's undergone incredible changes in recent years. And while university libraries serve a very different audience, they're not immune to those external pressures and desires that are facing all libraries. We're pulling in a range of experts to help us consider these changes as we think about our own campus. Our previous lecture was with Karen Fairbanks. Our next lecture in the lecture series will be April 14th with Kelly Hay and Ben Utes of Design Lab Architects. And the last in the lecture series will be with Brick Julian, who's a strategic account manager with public sector at All Steel. And that lecture is going to be on the 26th at 6 p.m. All of the lectures are on the COED lecture page, so check them out to register. When we started talking about the future of university libraries, there was a regional university library project that kept being mentioned. And this is the Grand Valley State University Library, which happens to be close to us, but we'll find out today about its national impact as well. And this project was done in collaboration with Steelcase. Lucky for us, we have strong ties with our professional and alumni network, and it turns out that the architects that are joining us today are very close connections. So joining us is Janice Suchan and Todd Stevens. Janice Suchan, AIA and lead AP, is an architect and vice president at Clark Construction Company, a Michigan-based construction management firm. Clark Construction has a 75-year history of pushing boundaries through innovation and creating the best places to work. Janice leads a diverse team in several markets, K through 12, higher education, healthcare, municipal, government, and private sectors. Janice co-leads the company's Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Group, and Women at Work programs. Prior to her role at Clark, Janice was a senior principal and managing leader of the Berkeley, Michigan office of Stantec. Janice is a graduate from the University of Detroit, although we don't hold that against her. She's passionate about architecture, construction, business, and management. Janice has previously been recognized by Crane's Detroit Business as 40 Under 40 Rising Star, as well as AIA Detroit's Young Architect of the Year. I got to know Janice over the last few years as we both serve on the Southeast Michigan ACE Mentorship Board. Also joining us is Todd Stevens. He's an alum of LTU. He's a designer, researcher, practice leader, and educator. Todd was recently elevated to the AIA College of Fellows. Many of you probably saw that shout out on our social media. Congratulations. Todd's award-winning educational architecture engages research, sustainability, and craft to impact learning and provide inspirational environments for those in the scholarly pursuit of knowledge. For more than 3 decades, Todd has been leading architectural designs across the United States, making significant contributions to the transformation of the educational environments. Todd's influence on the next generation of architects and interior designers is demonstrated through his 10 years of adjunct teaching at Lawrence Technological University. Thank you for that, too. Todd is the learning practice leader at Progressive AE. Please help me in welcoming Todd and Janice today. Thanks and welcome.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about libraries and the future. We just got our kind of bios here. Excited to be back at Lawrence Tech and talking to you about some of the work that we have done together. I was a principal designer on two of the projects that we'll be talking about today, the Grand Valley and the Kettering project. And now I'm at Progressive AE as the learning practice leader. So I only work in the education space, mostly higher education. So I've been doing that for 30 some years.
And again, I'm Janice Suchan. Is this working? Excellent. So Carl stole our thunder a little bit about the intros, but it's very kind, Carl. Thank you. Again, I'm Janice with Clark Construction. Currently, our company is working on the construction management of the Kettering University Learning Commons that we're going to talk about today, in addition to the Grand Valley Library project. I do want to note, actually, if we can go back one slide real quick, before we move on, that again, just to be clear, the work that Todd and I did on both of the projects that we're going to cite here today was done while we were employed at Stantec Architecture.
So when we started the Grand Valley project, they said that they wanted a library of the future. Now, it's kind of an intimidating kind of thing to start to think about, is how do you design something that's for the future? And at the time, this poet, she's a Nobel Prize poet, Wisławska Szymborska. I might have pronounced her name incorrectly, but when I pronounce the word future, the first syllable belongs to the past. And for me, that kind of says how fast things are going and changing. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and how to anticipate what's going to happen by looking back and looking forward at the same time. So when we started, I was reading a book. It's called The Clock of the Long Now. And the idea of the clock of the long now is this idea about time and how to make long-term thinking. There's 6 distinct time scales, and survival really depended on kind of working within each of those time scales. From the fast to the slow. I mean, fashion is constantly changing and churning. And that kind of moves to, and it's all about change. Commerce, buying things online and other things, again, very fast pace. And then you start to kind of go down slower and slower into governance and culture. Let me tell you, the earth is going to be here after we're gone. So nature is kind of the slowest mover of all of these pieces. And the question is, where is now? You know, like for me, you know, now is right here in this room talking to you. And for my grandparents, it was totally a different kind of structure of now because they didn't have this kind of cacophony of things coming at them. So, you know, as I look out, you know, as we were designing this, Grand Valley Library at the very top is right when we started the design for the library. You know, 2006, 7, you know, we were starting to have the conversations. And you can see some of the social things that were happening. Facebook was just coming online. MySpace was a player. Twitter was beginning to happen. And then from an environmental standpoint, you can start to see like LEED way beginning in 88, 89 time frame. And you can see the lead kind of pacing up a little bit quicker and quicker as we're getting into that 2000 zone. But then Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, which had profound implications to this kind of the importance of environmentalism to our world. It's kind of had a heightened awareness to it. And then technology. You know, the typewriter was banished in 1991, right? So you don't have those any longer. And I just chose the iPhone here, but you can put an Android or whatever on there. BlackBerry is up there as well, but I think that's kind of disappearing. And then every year, there's something new, right? 1, 2, I have to update this slide every time I do the presentation. I don't think I have iWatch on there yet. You know, like those are the things that are happening in this world concurrently. And then when you start to kind of blur those lines between technology and kind of those social platforms, you're getting the apps and what they're doing and how you're interacting with the world and your friends and the media. So it's blasting now. So all of these things are kind of happening in a cacophony. So if you look at just one example, like let's take Zoom, right? So they started in 2012, And then by 2020, they had about 10 million users on Zoom. COVID hits, and between February, March, and April, they grew by 100 million each of the months, right? So it's just kind of shows you the scalability of these apps and what they're doing. And you can't imagine designing a library like we were designing a library with the kind of the things that are happening in the world today. So you gotta step back, look out, and just kind of understand where you're at and start to follow the trend lines where these things are going so you can anticipate them. What are you coming to school for? The latest thinking is moving into a conceptual economy, from the industrial age to the information age to now to the conceptual age, where high concept and high touch are really important, imagination and joyfulness. So design, being able to talk about kind of aesthetics, not just function. Storytelling, data is not enough. You have to be able to tell a story with that data. Symphony, making all these pieces into a whole and being able to kind of have that kind of conversation about something bigger. Empathy, with the technology, we're able to talk to people across the globe. And so now you need to have an understanding of cultures and importance of that. It should be fun. You know, we don't have to go to work just to kind of, do a timesheet. And then the idea of what you're doing should have purpose. And so those are the things that we are seeing that we're trying to achieve in the work to try to allow that to happen.
So those were all the kinds of conversations that we were having with our client, Grand Valley State University, getting into much depth for, I would say it was approximately 2 years before the actual design of the building began, the design process. While those conversations were going on, we also went through a very in-depth primary research process, and we did that in coordination not just with the university itself, but also with Steelcase, who has a group that focuses specifically on that, and we partnered with them as an organization to go through this research process. There were many components and facets to that process, but I think it's a very defined process that Steelcase has modeled, and the most important piece of that, in my opinion, were the on-site observations. And so we worked very closely with them to take the things that Todd just talked about, talk about the library of the future, and then create mock environments within their existing library on campus. The old Zumberg Library, we would create, furniture, combinations and different scenarios, different study environments, whether it was a loud environment, a quiet environment, an active, a collaborative, or a place of solitude. And we would mock those up in the library and then encourage students to use those. And we would have cameras, which we could then watch the videos afterwards to see how those students interacted with those spaces. Did it change their behavior? Did it attract more people to one space as opposed to another? And then what's the right mix of those spaces? So Todd's going to talk a little bit more about that.
Scott, I think of you when you went to a trip abroad and you were photographing the plaza and you watched the people and they kind of moved in a clockwise or counterclockwise kind of fashion. We just sat and we watched and we watched and we watched. And then you start to kind of put your photographs together and you start to see things and how we started to find some observations and insights. We noticed that there was going to be a cafe in the space, and so we had positioned small cafe tables with high top chairs next to them. And the students, they took out their book bag and they threw it into the chair right next to them. A natural occurrence, right? Because it was their filing cabinet. It was right next to them. We lost a chair. That was important. Every chair, every seat had to be a good seat. And so that was one of the kind of the key insight is we needed to begin to kind of drop the tables, make them a little bit wider so that collaboration could happen real time. And so that's the kind of really subtle things that we began to start to see. This idea of, and I can tell you in your library that you probably have this happen all the time, it's very quiet. It's very quiet in a library, and you will see students walk up to the information or the reference desk, and you can see them being a little bit intimidated by this idea of asking a question, because everybody will know that they don't know. And so that was a kind of a key concern of ours, to start to kind of amp up and create a buzz so that they felt comfortable asking questions. Alone together, students loved to be together in a room, but they still had to do focus time. And so you would start to see people with headphones on so they could achieve just that. But also, the rhythm of the day of, they would be alone at certain times when they didn't have a chance to work with their teammates. But when they, in the after hour, right around dinner time, you would start to see these people getting together and being able to kind of work together. And so we needed to ebb and flow through the day of the library, and also through the semester of the library, because exam week, it's crazy in there. Any other time is a much lighter kind of thing. And then we took cues from hospitality as well. If you go to a hotel, instead of the big, large desks, they're now being much more smaller and more intimate. You've got more approachable. And so we began to test these ideas in the existing library about how things could get a little smaller, and you could rotate your monitor and have a conversation. We also tested things that didn't work. We had a little alcove, and the students were a little freaked out having to go into the alcove with the librarian. And so it didn't work, right? And so we didn't put that in the final building. So this idea of testing is so critical to get it right at the very beginning. We toured a lot. The team went to almost all, academic libraries that were kind of the state of the art at the time, looking at different components at each one of these. Automatic storage retrieval system at University of Nevada in Reno. Other places that we went included Apple stores and to the II McCormick place to see, kind of where life and activity happened, and then how do you replicate that? How do you create that buzz? It was an important kind of component of kind of that research, is to get outside the library so that we could kind of bring that focus back. Why is a museum quiet and an Apple store loud and kind of buzz of activity? And they have the same materials, wood floors, kind of white walls, and interacting with something. And it's just kind of an interesting kind of observation to take a look at those and critically look at those. So we get a program, you put walls around that program, you put a bigger wall around that program, and you're done with the architecture, right? So that's sort of the problem. Most of the centers that were going to be housed in the library, the writing center or research center, wanted just that. They knew what they knew, and they wanted it that same way. But we had enough time to pause and pull those pieces apart, take down those walls, and begin to look at those pieces very critically. For instance, the cafe had that buzz and noise and loudness, right? So how can we use that in the areas of the reference desk so you could start to kind of ask a question without anybody being able to hear that you didn't know where Thoreau was or who he was? Putting that in the study area so you get more people together and put your headphones on, you can still do that. The reference desk became a real quick ability to tie into that research. And so nobody knows the difference between a reference desk and a circulation desk, or I didn't, right? I just went up and asked a question, right? And so those are the things that we wanted to kind of tease out in this and bringing them together and co-locating them and allow that research to kind of find its way into writing. And so we had peer-to-peer. So we had students working in these spaces that were trained in writing. So they have great writing skills. And as a student, as you would come to get some help on your paper, they would see real time that you didn't quite have enough research. And so the tutor could shift and move you over to the research person, or help you with the digital skills, right? And so this is a team of people working together, a cohort that allows that digital skills to be used in the speech prep rooms, right? So you use these digital tools like I'm doing today, and you get to practice your speech over and over and over again. I wish I had this when I was in college. All of those working together, ebbing and flowing, to create what Grand Valley called their knowledge market, this place where you can kind of glean knowledge in there. And the great thing about taking down these walls and having a little bit more open space was that, much like in the day of the life of the library, this thing would ebb and flow from kind of the knowledge market to places for peer-to-peer tutoring, TED Talks, study, lecture, and it has that ebb and flow of the day of what the students needed. This building is all about the students. The master plan called for everything to be south of this line for the building. The site is located right here on the campus. That's the Grand Valley. You can see it kind of outlined in the top kind of area here. And then the old campus hugged that edge of the campus. This was one of the last parcels left on the east side of that main road there. So we began to start to kind of take and understand the site as well, pulling the building apart and putting things into the building, and we weren't shy about it, to pull students in. We put a cafe in, we put a gallery in, we put a multi-purpose space in. And so we were trying to pull. In fact, right below this is the student center right here, and about 1 million, can you see my thing? No. Where the diagram says Kirchhoff Center, 1 million students get off on a bus every day, or every year, I'm sorry. Every year, 1 million students get off, right? That's the source of people that you want to bring into the library. And so what we did is we pulled the building apart to kind of allow that, we put the building in the way and we gave them a shortcut around it, through it. And then we dedicated one half to being a loud, active buzz, and the other side, the blue, to more quiet and book kind of holding spaces. And then we broke the rule. We went north of that precious line and said this library is so important to the health of a campus that it needs to have a front room. It needs to have an address on the main axes of campus. But we were very respectful of, this is the final site plan here. We were really respectful because we used everything. You can see the kind of the line of the campus, the solidity of it. When we went into that zone, we used glass. We kind of pulled it out and made that the living room to the campus. And this is a view to that. And the ideas behind that are to bring in natural light so you can read a book anywhere inside the library. But it also shows the intellectual heart of the campus deep into the evening, right on the main axis of campus. And just, it's really terrific. It was rich with all the right materials and light and it's a LEED Platinum building, so sustainability is another kind of piece of this building. And we haven't even talked about books for the library, right? You know, whenever I go on a tour of a library, I grab a random book off the shelves, I open it up, first I blow off the dust, then I open it up, and you can see here, 18th of July, 1975 was the last time that book had been opened up. Precious dollars are set on that square footage. Where I'm standing right now, well, in today's market, it's a lot more, but it was around like $350 a square foot. And you can imagine putting a book, how much dollars that adds up over to house a collection for a university. So what we wanted to do is to have the idea of the serendipity and the humanities are important, and we didn't want to divorce ourselves away from being able to kind of pull a book and take a look at it or open a folio, but we had to find out which were the right books to bring to the light. And those were the humanities, so we dedicated 150,000 books in open shelves, mostly the humanities. We worked hand in hand with the faculty, and 15,000 square feet for that effort. But the rest of the books are located in an automatic storage retrieval system. So it's a warehouse for books. 3 stories, 600,000 volumes can be housed in the storage system. They're not all full at this point. It's 3 stories, and what it really does is anticipate some of those books in the humanities ultimately kind of finding their way into the vault. And we're seeing through COVID the fact that, you know, the faculty are realizing that you can still get your books even when you're at home, right? And so this idea of having access is critical, and we've found ways to do just that. This is it in action. So pulls out the bin, heavy bin, lifts it up, and it's coming over to the circulation desk.
What?
And there's their books right there. They're shoveled over to the right here.
Because there is a lot of books.
And the librarian will pick the book out that has been called for. And in less than 1 minute, you can have your book from anywhere in the world, frankly. It's a pretty awesome thing. But that square footage afforded this. It afforded space for students to come together, to work, to find their place inside the library, to see and be seen. We provided places for overlooks so that students could kind of be working and overhear somebody and see somebody, and that serendipity started to find its way into the program itself. You can see like that natural light, the living room to the space, the grand atrium. Students would move, everything in here is on casters and will move to where they want to be. This building is owned by the students. Anything that happens in this building has to be student-centric. So no faculty meetings would happen in this building. That's kind of one of the rules.
I think just a quick story to add to that is this is a nice curated, professionally photographed shot. So everything looks nice and orderly, but as Todd said, this is a student-owned facility. They can make it, for whatever purpose they would like to use it for that day, that week, that month. Kind of similar, we talked a lot about the similar environment in an architectural studio, which you can all relate to. So much so that you can imagine what a place like this looks like during exam prep time. There will be students that come in and set up tents. It's my favorite story. They'll actually set up a tent in an area of the building for the week so that they have their own space to study, and the dean and the leaders at the institution not only allowed that, but encouraged it. So it was a really different environment for an academic library.
So this is, I'm going to step back for a second and let the Dean of Libraries talk a little bit about the
For
project.
about a decade before we actually began building this library, I had been noticing that the roles of libraries were changing pretty rapidly. We were trying to escape the gravity of the common library. We wanted this to be a very different space. We wanted it to feel different and look different so that students could act differently. I'm Lee Van Orstel. I'm Dean of Libraries. My official title is Dean of University Libraries at Grand Valley State University. Grand Valley as a university is tremendously committed to deep, real learning, and that is active learning. We call it sometimes high-impact learning, and that is actually one of the core principles of this library. We tried to turn completely inside out the notion of not thinking, what do you need to do in an academic library to make a student comfortable, but ask just very boldly, what do students need to be doing? And then create the space where they could do it, and it just happens to be a library. There wasn't a body of literature per se about how do you make a library totally different for today. But what we did do was work with Steelcase. We knew that we wanted to be sure that we understood student behaviors as well as we could. We watched how much space they took, we watched their postures, we watched the way they interacted with one another or not. And what we discovered in the process of doing this was that there was a rhythm to the student's life that was unknown to us at its fullest. We began to identify a range of student behaviors that was along the spectrum of the student alone, students together. When they really are heads down on a project or a test or some other creative endeavor, they often expect and demand almost total silence and stillness. So at one end of the spectrum, we looked at spaces that would be almost monk-like cells. On the other end of the spectrum, and the thing that I think makes our library different from other libraries, is that we elevated the concept of noise to an art. I felt like from the beginning that the other end of that alone together spectrum is, let's be really together. Let's just not be together with my group, let me be together with other groups doing similar things, so that students work in an environment that simulates real life environments. I really think if we hadn't had the furnishings we have in this building, we could not have elevated this environment into something new. If we had a single defining concept, it would be the knowledge market. And the idea there, it goes back to active learning. It goes back to rhythm of the day and flexibility in the students' a day. Most importantly of all, it reduces the threshold that's required of a student to engage more deeply with expert help. Everything around it, we've designed an environment that is so accommodating, so compelling, so comfortable, that if we can get them to come in and then present them with options to learn and engage while they're here, we've done something important to positively impact their college experience. This building is gorgeous. It's sexy, it's beautiful, it's filled with light. There are 1,000 ways to entertain yourself in this building. But if it doesn't ultimately make a difference in the way students perform, it's not impactful. In the old days, you'd have a library that was very academic and had its own set of rules, and then you'd have this social thing where there was another set of rules. And if you brought your social rules into the library, you could get in trouble or be shushed, which is a horrible legacy for libraries. But nowadays, there's no need to do that. There's no need to limit. Students need to be in an environment where the connections they feel to all the worlds that they connect with can be allowed more or less simultaneously. And these students are going to be working in a world where that kind of connectivity, that kind of split-second shifting from one thing that has maybe a social implication to another that has a work or a business or a learning implication, those boundaries are not crisp anymore. And I think our environments need to allow people to move smoothly in and out of those different worlds that they inhabit. What works to prepare a student to be successful in their classes with the kinds of skills they have to use is not that different from the skills they're going to need when they graduate and go into the workplace.
So that was Lee Van Orsdale, Dean of Libraries, University Libraries at Grand Valley. She was a visionary. When we started the conversation asking, shouldn't we be talking to the students more? She said, if I talk to the students, they don't know the things that we're talking about and where we're going. Of course, we're going to have students on the team, but all they would want is more something, like something. So she was like, this is something that they can't anticipate that they need, and so really having that vision to work through it. You're seeing kind of a few zones in here in the library. Different posture types was really important as well. Every seat was an important seat, and finding the different types of postures throughout the library. So we actually have a courtyard in the center of the library, literally on the 3rd floor. And there's another floor above you and a roof penthouse above you. And so this had a place in the middle. So when you're reading, in the middle of winter, it'll be snowing in the middle of the library. And then we, in the summer, we wanted to put a tree in there, but nobody would guarantee that the tree would live inside this kind of middle of the library. And so we took, some of the wood that you're seeing through the building, this recycled, reclaimed wood from the furniture making industry. And we took that same sort of idea of wood, and we took that tree, cut it up, and hung it above in the courtyard. And it moves throughout the day to create different shadows and light inside that courtyard. You can see, different study spaces. This is a LEED Platinum. We used a raised floor system throughout the building. It's incredibly hard to build because of the technical requirements of bringing in all the HVAC into the spaces. So, but it was the right thing to do because it brought fresh air into the breathing zone of the students. It's called displacement ventilation, so it's perfect today in a COVID environment, right? So as I'm breathing off my toxins, that air kind of pillows to me and it plumes, literally plumes up and is discharged out of the room. And so working with our engineers is so critical to making these things successful. A lot of people don't think about that kind of relationship. Just flexibility, and proven results. This is some of the numbers right out of their first year. They had over 1 million visitors, an increase during that time. There's 738 research consultations by peers, so kind of an activity. 97% felt that they were actually better prepared after they had met with a peer institute. I should note that the librarian hasn't gone away. The librarian is still an important piece of that. The peer-to-peer is allowing that kind of interaction to happen real time and more fluidly, because you can approach a student easier than somebody that has gray hair like me. But the librarian was there as a backstop. If there was a deeper question, that they were right there and immediate to do the kind of deeper dive. I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but it was just really, really successful inside that. And then one time there was a sneak peek of the library, and this is a picture through and we overheard one of the students say, "Learning just got sexy," and that's where the kind of the tagline comes from, Grand Valley.
So quick time check, Carl. We got about, all right, you want us to go through Kettering? Okay, you're going to start. Right?
So Kettering University had a new president, and we did a master plan on the campus, award-winning. We did it with him and his team, really, and the Learning Commons was one of the kind of key pieces of the master plan, and this was in earnest to begin the Learning Commons. And we did research with Kettering as well. It's so critical to kind of see the world through another lens and develop a language with your clients. And this is how we achieved that. We went from one coast to the other. We went to Stanford University, and we went to the D School at Stanford. The D School brings design thinking to engineers, to business people. And what they do is it's a large, flexible, open space where they give a wild-ass, real-life problem, like bringing bridges to Africa, and have groups of people working together to design these spaces, or these kind of challenges. We also visited the engineering center there as well, where collaboration was a kind of a big deal there. They could actually walk up to a television screen that had a real-time live feed to MIT. And so you could have lunch literally with somebody at MIT and talk about some of the projects that you're working on. It was real-time all the time. Connecting to the landscape and other things were important. We also went to IDEO. IDEO is the company that made the New York Times a tablet, or kind of more into electronic, moving with the time and starting to have those conversations. You know, there's no secret sauce. It was just open space, a fluid dynamic, ebb and flow of people coming in and looking for the opportunities to cross-reference each other's ideas. And then we went to the other side, and we went to Duke University. Duke University is, steeped in history, a beautiful, beautiful campus, connected by walkways, and Dr. McMahon, the president of Kettering, had gone to Duke, and he talked about the importance of the people spaces outside, the quads, and the kind of the scale of those for Duke University. And then we went to UNC's Centennial campus, where the Hunt Library was recently opened. That's designed by Snøhetta. Beautiful, kind of everything opposite of Duke, right? So we were seeing all the contrasts and really having the conversation. What are we trying to do with your building at Kettering University? Open, fluid, technology-driven, but there's still places for quiet, contemplative spaces as well.
All right, so similarly to Grand Valley, when we started the programming process at Kettering, we quickly learned that there will be no program for this facility, which as an architect, as Todd mentioned earlier, is a little bit challenging. We're typically used to understanding what do you want in your building per space type, how big would you like that to be, start putting walls around it and create the building. Here, it was the program's out the window. It's about defining the student experience and crafting how that activity and how that movement through that facility is. And the building itself becomes the program. And the best way I can try to explain that is, again, in Dr. McMahon's words, was think of it as a museum. Take a museum such as the Guggenheim. That the art, contained within that building is very, very important, absolutely amazing. But the building itself, is also a big, big piece, if not the major piece of the program for that facility, and the experience that you have while traveling from space to space within that museum. And again, the big goal of this project was that this building itself, not only was the program, but what needed to exemplify the physical embodiment of what it meant to be a Kettering student. So we went through an exhaustive process to understand, what does that mean? And so as we were trying to define those experiences and those activities, these are some symbols that kind of represent what we've heard, from the administration at Kettering and our team as we were brainstorming. Obviously we want to learn. Engaging all of the different schools at Kettering with each other was critically important. Finding places, as you saw in the Grand Valley Project as well, to touch down and practice your presentation skills, give an impromptu presentation, bring in an external speaker on a dime, create, maker kind of spaces, messy spaces, that's big in the Kettering curriculum. Obviously lounge. Dining was huge. Dining used to exist in the academic building, the administration building. They decided to move it all into this facility so that this building became a magnet. There's a reason in between classes throughout the day, 24/7, for students to come to this facility and to stay and to learn and to engage. Obviously study, collaborate, industry. There's many spaces in this building for industry partners, community partners to come in to dock for a certain period of time, to mentor and to work with the Kettering students. A big old school lecture space, a very high-raked space to bring in, and attract top-notch speakers to come and speak to the students at Kettering. Caffeinate, very important. Connect with the campus as a whole, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And most importantly, stay. The big driver for this facility at Kettering was to get their students to stay on campus. It's a big commuter school. To stay on campus and to stay in Flint was critical. And finally, believe it or not, live. We created a hotel space in the upper level for, again, one more reason to attract top faculty when they're being interviewed, top presenters when coming in to lecture in the auditorium. They have a place to actually stay and live in the facility. So then as a building, we try to look at, okay, so you have all these activities defined and desired, what do we do with that? So there's some kind of core prerequisite types of, activities that happen all the way throughout the facility, shown in the middle there. And then off to the right, you can see the high population, very high activity type of spaces, the lecture, the dining, the maker space, the presentation areas, the cafe. Those are located on the bottom two levels, so that high activity, high population. And then as you work your way up through the 4-story building, the quieter, more solitude and small collaborative spaces, the partnering with industry study, lounging, that happens on the upper two levels. So I'll quickly walk through what that looks like as a building. Not sure if you're familiar with the Kettering campus, but you can see the Flint River over there to the right. I keep zooming in here. And then our site is this area that they currently call the beach. It's just south of the administration building. And then off to the right is the student housing. To the left is University Drive. As we kind of zoom in there, we started with that base level, and that's where a lot of the service components are, the mechanical, electrical support, the loading dock, and that building was shifted and twisted and oriented along the solar axis, because this is also a highly sustainable facility, so we wanted to get that on the correct axis. I've got some parking and service space to that lower level on the south. And then as Todd mentioned, kind of pulled the building apart a bit, similarly to the Grand Valley Project. So the space on the left in orange, again, the high population, high activity area. We've got the maker space over there in that steep tiered auditorium. Off to the right is that major dining area with multiple platforms close to the housing area and a way to pull students in on a daily and hourly basis, as well as I'll show you a photo later of a Kiva space, which is an informal lecture opportunity where anybody can come and give a presentation. Everybody in the building can hear it, and they can pass by and join as they walk on by. In the middle is a 4-story atrium, which again I'll show you some pictures of, and that drives light throughout every floor plate of the building. At almost every spot in this facility, you get natural light, and you can also see a different part of campus to orient yourself within the campus proper. The two major areas of entry. And then this was a really important move here. We connected this facility to the administration building, so that as students and prospective students come to the administration building, there's an easy way to go back and forth. That's the lower level of the connector, which is enclosed. To the right of that connector is the quad, so kind of going back to the Duke University example that Todd mentioned, we wanted to create a more traditional, nicely proportioned exterior space that's now enclosed by the connector, the admin building, and the housing. And then conversely, off to the west side, a forecourt that is a natural outdoor amphitheater that steps down to that connector from University Drive and also provides a nice portal view into that facility. And then on top of that connector is an exterior path, which connects you to the level up of the administration building, so you can walk on top of that. And there's also a green roof terrace that can be occupied. And then the 2 floors stacked above that are tweaked a little bit to allow, again, some terrace space and opportunity for folks to go outside. And again, that's where more of the solitude, more collaborative, quieter, small group spaces are. The industry partnering space, the hotel room in the upper left-hand corner there, as well as some IT kiosks and resource kiosks. So again, there's no books in this facility, which is very rare for a Learning Commons or library. The intent is for the books to stay in the building across the street. That collection is constantly culled and reduced, and now is going to be used more as a book storage place, and as time goes on and more books become digitalized, that collection will continue to diminish over time. Right now, the building is under construction. The occupancy date is June of this year, so fingers crossed we're on schedule to get that done. And that's what it looks like currently. For more information on this project, I would highly encourage you to go to Kettering University's website. They have a website just for the Learning Commons, a great video by Dr. McMahon you can see on the lower right-hand corner there, where you can tell the story and show you many more renderings and photos of the facility. But this is kind of where it's at now. Again, you can see on the lower right-hand corner that connector, which you can walk on top of that on the outside. It's connected on the inside, and even that inside connector is an experience. There's art galleries within that space, so that as you're moving from building to building, there's always that learning and engagement opportunity. And then the green roof terraces, you can see right at the end of that connector before you collide with the lightning bolt shape of the upper 2 levels. And then starting to take shape inside, how you move from space to space within this facility and how to strategically choreograph those student paths to expose them to all of these different activities and try to hook them and engage them in those activities was really important. So unlike a traditional building where you may have stacked egress stairs everywhere, there are stairs strategically located in very odd shapes and places throughout the entire facility, again, to try to get that movement from level to level and from space to space and activity to activity to get students to get out of their comfort zone and to look at other opportunities to engage with other program students, et cetera. You can see the amount of glass there. You always have a visual way out to, again, orient yourself in campus and let that natural light drive deep through the space. Over to the right, you can see looking up in the middle of that 4-story atrium, there's skylights at the top to drive light deep throughout the facility. There's also a very prominent high-profile floating conference space, which architecturally was a challenge to pull off. And then over to the left, again, you can sort of see some of those staggered stairs. The stair on the bottom on that left picture, you can see how we try to make the most out of every, what I'll call in-between space as you're traveling from space to space. We took the stair landing there and created a little, common space, a gathering space right off of the landing where you can sit, overlook the atrium, the cafe, and the dining space below. And then this is up at the upper level looking at that floating conference room at the top. And again, looking down into the atrium, the hoteling space up at the top, some of the industry spaces. And I know it's hard to see that as it's still under construction, but I think you can get the flavor there. And all of this will have that same noise and that same buzz, and you'll hear the cafe brewing and the smell of the food in the dining area, and it's going to be a very activated space across the board. Again, at the bottom of the atrium, looking up on the left, and then the kiva that I mentioned where, we do have a formal lecture hall, but this is out in the open right next to the dining, so students, as they're eating, can come hang out here. There may be a group of students that want to practice a presentation or an external speaker that they bring in or a faculty member that may want to give a topic. Everybody can hear and see it. They can gravitate toward this area and learn on the fly.
I think we can probably end it there with this kind of As for the future, it's not a matter of predicting it, but of making it possible. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions or talk about these projects.
So I know that there's people online too, so we can take questions on YouTube through the chat there. We can also take some questions in the room. Maybe I'll kick this off and ask the first question and maybe challenge your timeline that you started with, which I love, and I want to check out that book. Far to the right on the timeline was culture. And what I'm very curious about, we talked about this a little bit before, I believe that you've changed the culture at those universities with the way that with the library. And I would then argue that culture, and I think we're talking at very different scales. It's kind of like a culture as a big thing, but maybe the culture in the university or a kind of micro culture within the university, I think has been impacted profoundly by the work that you're doing. And so maybe talk about how quickly that changed and maybe how you could kind of track that and how you might propose that to future clients.
I was talking to a librarian at the University of Michigan. We did a project there, the Clark Map Library at the University of Michigan. And I was walking through it last week, and I stopped and talked to the librarian. And they were doing similar things at the University of Michigan as well for their spaces, taking down Outbook and putting in kind of spaces. And he knows what's going on and he understands it, the complexity of it, but he wanted to make sure, and I think it kind of goes to your question, is these are academic spaces. They're not airport lounges. So that the ideals, libraries are more important today than they ever have been. With Google at your fingertips, students don't know the depth of resources available to them that a library has. I would rather have my future doctor studying from the journals of oncology rather that the library would be able to provide rather than from Google, like My Cancer, what is it? But for instance here, the Kahn Library, we were just visiting, and there's beautiful folio books that students here don't know exist. And as you go through those folio books, you see things that you would never see in Google. You can't see it. And so getting those relationships and kind of showing that importance of a library is what it's all about. So that's, and the culture, it changed pretty quickly. We were actually a little bit nervous because the Student Center is directly adjacent, connected, much like yours is, and we were afraid it would pull, and it has, but they've each had their own kind of life, and they still work very well together. There's a connector at the Grand Valley Project at the lowest level that you can move food and people from one space to the other as well.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you both for the great presentation today. One of my studios is actually looking at revamping our library here. So I have a question. You talked about, tying into a little bit about what Carl said, you talked about culture. Was it something that the library asked you to take a look at, or was it something that you brought as an idea to the library to kind of move them into a different area? I'm a retired person from Steelcase, so we did all sorts of things on culture and cultural awareness and making sure the client understood culture. So I'm curious, from your perspective, was it the demand from the library to do this, or was it you bringing some innovative ideas to the library?
I think we were bringing innovative ideas to the library as a team. So the research that we did, we knew that we wanted to pull students into the library. We knew we wanted to have an activity and a buzz because of the research that we did. We saw that it was quiet, and I've witnessed more than once people walking up to the reference desk and turning around. And you can go almost to any library now and you'll see a sign at the reference desk, ask us, please, you know. because it's such a problem. And so we needed to change the culture, and we were looking for those insights of how to make it, give it the permissions. But I will tell you, there's no signs in the library that it was an important driver is that the students own the space and they will police it as well. And so if it gets too noisy, the students have to deal with it because it's their library. And it's, you know, it was a learning curve for the librarians. They were kind of apt to try to reset the library, like move the chairs back to where they were originally posted. But as they do it now, they reset it every semester rather than trying to do it every day.
Just to add a thought to that, I think it was an amazing collaborative, team of thought leaders, not only on the architectural side, but bringing in Steelcase and all of their thought leadership. Arup was involved in the project from a sustainability and engineering standpoint, who designed state-of-the-art, environmental, buildings, environmentally conscious buildings globally. And then I can't take Grand Valley away from that. I mean, they knew what they were looking for culturally, the impact that they wanted to make to that campus right out of the gate. And they, pulled the best team that they could in to brainstorm with them about, defining what that meant. And then even more specifically, the Grand Valley itself as a whole. Lee Van Orsdel, who you watched the video, she had this building, this image, this environment in her head, just didn't know how to get it out. And so I think that was all of our job, was to work with her and try to get that vision that she had onto the paper. And they held tight to it. We had a lot of challenges along the way. It's certainly not easy to pull off a facility like that. And so I give a huge amount of credit to the university and Lee herself for their leadership and commitment to an idea that was unlike any other campus prior to that.
I have a comment and a question. The comment is, I've always had the theory that young students who they come to the library, it's the first time they have to negotiate with an old man who does not have any judgment over them. So it helps, I feel, this idea of working with a reference librarian to develop, a back and forth as an adult. But secondly, with COVID been with us now for 2 years, I think it's changed a little bit about the way we look at any kind of a space and how we are now delivering education. It may not change a whole lot in the future. Do you think your spaces at Grand Valley are ready for that? And what about Kettering? Are you adjusting anything to be thinking about this for our future?
On the Grand Valley project, it was embedded with the displacement ventilation that I talked a little bit. So the heating and cooling kind of helped with the COVID issues. But they still did COVID protocols. But the space, because there wasn't books, allowed students to have a little bit more space. The raised floor is set in a grid, so you can move plugs throughout the building as well. And so it offered that ability to be very adaptable and flexible to achieve more space for each of the students inside there. So in that regard, yeah, I think that it's done well, and their numbers are perking back up again inside the library. The numbers I showed earlier about kind of the proven results, I talked to the experienced librarian at Grand Valley today, and she said those numbers are continually in that same sort of range. Those were taken early in the life of the building.
I think having facilities like that, obviously Kettering's not open yet, so we can't, report any success quite yet, but having facilities like that I think are really important coming out of a pandemic to, again, act as a magnet, a place where people want to be, and to get those students back on campus, because it's got to be a compelling story and a compelling space. Otherwise, they've proven they can work remotely, and it's not a necessity. And so I think it's going to drive the need for spaces and buildings like this on academic campuses that much more. Another big piece of that too, I think, is the flexibility, right? That, what is needed out of that building, I hope not after the next pandemic, but who knows, right? These facilities have to be flexible to adapt over time. And in both of the projects that we talked about today, you'll see very, very little interior walls, right? It's going to be very easy as time moves on to craft and redefine each of those spaces as students' needs change over time.
Yeah, they actually created the experienced librarian was a position that they created specifically for this library to curate it. Like if they have the spaces and it wasn't curated with TED Talks and poet readings and guest authors coming to the library, the ideas wouldn't work. And so, you know, it was ready for them, but they wanted to ensure that the experience was kind of mapped out through the life of the building and through so that is literally her job at Grand Valley, is to kind of organize and curate the building.
Oh, yay. So just in terms of the beautiful atriums, I know we've been doing some of this with our students currently with code, the sort of limitations on all of those open spaces due to ratings and some of those things. So I was just wondering what loopholes and kind of what interactions you had with the AHJ to create some of those really big, beautiful open spaces while also meeting up with codes, especially for those atriums.
The authorities have had jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can start by just being brutally honest, right? It's not cheap to pull off a space like that. It's a big investment. But I think in a learning commons project, that ability, again, to connect all of those spaces and to be able to see that activity from floor to floor. I mean, just imagine both of those facilities without that space. You know, it's a completely different student experience. So to be able to see, hear, and engage and be, you know, pulled into different areas is really important. So it's, I think, you know, from a construction management side, it's really important in that early stage of the project to properly budget for a space like that. Obviously, skylights and then the air evacuation that you have to do per code is pretty pricey. But I think at the end of the day, it's worth it. And if it's planned appropriately for at the beginning of the project, it can happen.
We did radiant floors in the atrium, so kept the heat at the people level, if you will, and not heating that whole volume. The light itself inside the space could, you know, we designed it so each of the mullions on the summer solstice would protect the plane of glass on the worst day, right? And so it became this intense leverage of our technology today to start to say it needs to be, I can't remember the number, 5.5 inches, because that's what it needs to be. All the window where shades come down at the right time automatically. This building is tuned to that site. And that's another kind of key driver to allow this thing to live and so that the costs are still affordable for the university. The long-term cost of ownership doesn't go away, so that's one of the key pieces as well.
And you mentioned the authorities having jurisdiction. There's obviously very close collaboration, especially in a job like Kettering. You know, Grand Valley, there was some separation from the atrium. Kettering, the whole building is open. And so our smoke evac design for that project included the vast majority, probably 80% of that facility, which is huge, right? And so we had a great engineering crew at Stantec that did a nice job, you know, designing all that, but also closely coordinating with the authorities.
And the designer.
Well, and maybe you just answered the question, but I think it was, as we talk about culture and maybe program, and maybe we don't talk about program anymore, maybe we're talking about experience and culture. When the librarian was talking, you're like, oh, the librarian said we worked with Steelcase, and you said, and us. And so maybe as a way to challenge, to like overstate this and maybe challenge, to some extent, and also you showed a project that was complete and a project that's not yet complete. And one thing that stood out to me is the project that's not yet complete doesn't have furniture, right? So to overstate this, right, and to maybe create a dialogue. I know we have architects and interiors people and game design people in the room. At a certain point, it might seem like the agency of that experience is in the hands of the furniture company more so than the architect. What do you guys, did you feel a kind of tension related to that? There's certainly a kind of temporality to how quickly the furniture can change and how it can adapt in a way that the walls or the building or the envelope can't. And so do you see this as a potential evolution of our profession, or is it, I don't know, how do you think about it? I'm
Well,
not saying I agree with what I'm saying either, but just as a way to maybe to talk about this.
So as an architect, the first charge is keep the environment out of the space, right? And make sure it's firmness, commodity, and delight, right? Making sure that we're the structure to hold it. And from an interior standpoint, it's from the skin out, right? And where those two meet, I don't care. And frankly, where those two meet, where there can be a dialogue and a conversation, is where you get the best ideas out of it. Steelcase was wonderful to work with. We were very, very fortunate to have him as a team member. And we were testing, we had people testing chairs everywhere, and is it comfortable to read? Could you stay there for that long? Because we knew that we needed to they wanted a bigger library. They just, the campus had grown from a small campus in 1960, early mid-60s, to something of 21,000 when we were designing the building, right? And so that original library wasn't able to accommodate the kind of the scale of what was happening in there. And Grand Valley didn't have enough money to build a building the right size to have all the user seats that it would need. So we needed to make every seat a good seat. And that's when I talk a little bit about that. And so when we lost a chair, that was catastrophic, and we needed to figure out ways to kind of mitigate that, so lowering the tables. And so Steelcase, we did the research with them. They did video capture, and we were able to see real time those things happening, and then we were having conversations with Steelcase to design these ideas with them, the casters and those types of things.
Yeah, and I don't think on either of those projects there was one that trumped the other, between architect, interior design, and furniture designer. If anything, I think the key to success for both was that the collaboration, the very messy collaboration between all three parties that is absolutely essential to pull off an environment like that. I think if any one of those players wasn't strongly in the mix, the result wouldn't be the same. So I personally, I think that's how every academic building project should go. I think having those thought leaders in all three areas is really critical.
Well, and maybe it was I love the acoustic diagram that you started to talk about, and I don't think that is in the realm of the furniture. That's the programming, the space, the acoustics, all of those things, and then the furniture probably allows for that to happen after the fact as well.
And it's probably, Grand Valley is probably the first project in my career where the furniture was being talked about before the design process even started. Typically, it's at the 11th hour as an afterthought during construction, and so I think that's just a game changer as far as what that environment and that space results
Now you're
in.
just supporting my argument, though. So what about, I'm also curious, I love the idea about the success of the project, but also you said there were concerns that maybe it would pull too much. I think for us on campus, and this is maybe directed to the students to see how they feel about it, we certainly, and both of you being architects, know the importance of the design studio, where we expect our students to be in the studio. Mm-hmm. If we were to do something in our library and our students start spending more time in the library than the studio, what would that mean? Would that change?
I was just gonna say that if the library is designed better than the studio, then the studio just kind of needs to step it up in design at a point for the student centric instead of work and production centric.
They have to be sympathetic with each other.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's a project in Toronto by Snowhead, Calgary, I've forgotten the name of it off the top of my head. But it is like a studio. Each floor is different, and that's it. Yeah, yeah. It is a studio in a lot of ways. There's digital projections that you're testing models on inside the library. Why not, right? These are the things that can augment a program. I think you've got to be careful for sure, to make sure that you're not losing the vibe of your core studio spaces, but I think that a nice way to augment them is a great challenge.
This isn't a specific library-related question. It was more of the Kettering building, but I was wondering if the garden terraces on the roof, if that's accessible to students, or if it's just like a visual thing or like a rain catchment system or anything.
I didn't catch the last half
Absolutely, it's available to students.
of that. Yes, yeah. You can walk on the connector, which is a hardscape from building to building, and that's accessible to students. And then there's a terrace that you can access off of the 3rd level, I believe. That's available for anybody and everybody, or they could reserve that space for a formal event out there as well. And any space that isn't walkable on that outdoor terrace does have a green roof system.
Grand Valley has a similar outdoor terrace at the very top of the building that you can go out, have lunch, read a book outside. So it's an extreme nice asset to have for our campus. Great views from above.
How was security addressed at Grand Valley, and how is it going to be addressed at Kettering for like book checkouts and things like that? The reason I ask is Karen Fairbanks was here a couple weeks ago, and she said a couple of the libraries she's involved with, they're not even looking at like scanning books anymore. So I'm curious as to what's happening with these two spaces.
So I'll start.
I can start with Kettering since it's easy. There's no books, no issue. but Grand Valley was a trick.
Grand Valley, we did RFID tags. So they, which they put in every book, right? So for Lee, if a student wanted to steal the book, she wanted them to have it, and she budgeted it for it. What she wanted to know is what book left so she could replace it. And so that was the mindset. Like, I want it. I want them to have open access. Security is second. First is primary is the students getting the information they need. Libraries are. I see students shaking their heads now, so that resonates. There are certain areas, of course, the special collections. Special collections, every library is different. Every library is different, and you need to understand what makes your library special and understand that. The Albert Kahn is one of the kind of the here on this campus, but so special collections and other things. There's a security protocol in those embedded in those, but she was more intrigued with the idea of letting people pass through and open and like often libraries have one way in, one way out, and it's very to navigate that is very difficult. And she wanted people to flow through this building.
And I don't, unfortunately, have the numbers off at the top of my head, but I do remember talking to her about that afterwards, and the amount that we're walking away was much less than what she had budgeted, so that was good news. And she always talked about a sense of trust in campus community, and when you give a building 80% of this footprint back to the students as their home, and you build that sense of trust and freedom, that they're less likely to want to take advantage of the situation.
In the benchmarking, we watch students go print something or go look for a book, and they would put their cell phone down on the table to hold their spot, right? And so this idea of trust was already embedded in the campus. And so those are kind of the insights that we saw, like, oh, it should be fine, right?
Well, I want to thank you both so much for coming today and sharing your insights. I think there's a lot of discussions, and I love the idea about the role that architects play in these types of things and the way that we have an impact on the experience and the way that we can think about future-proofing these things and what happens on university campuses as well. So thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.